Good evening from Vietnam, Ella. Thanks a lot for spending your morning joining our Inside Sharing show and share your stories with our global audience. And on behalf of the listeners, we want to say thank you for your participation. And you are this episode is our 500th episode in 18 months. So thank you for making it happen for us.
That is amazing, and I am honored to be here. I'm looking forward to this. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, you've been to our country before for 2 weeks, right? I hope that you had a good good trip here. And in our culture, it's a great honor if we can have you to do a little bit introduction about who you are and the works that you do. Is that okay if you can do that for us?
Sure. Yeah, and actually, like I said, I spent about 2 weeks there for work, and then another, I think, almost 2 weeks for just play. And it was such a delight to be there. So um, it's wonderful to talk to you. Yeah. So my name is Ella, and my um, background, I guess, my professional background is I was trained as an engineer at MIT, um, and then spent 13 years at the design firm IDEO. And after, during that time, I was always kind of the person who did, um, in addition to leading projects and working on projects as a first engineer and then a designer and a researcher and a strategist, I was also the person who did sort of all the workshops and teaching for the studio that I was in. And I left after 13 years, now it's just over a decade ago, to just see what I and design thinking and whatever could do in the world, and just see who reached out and what happened. And so been independently coaching, teaching, workshopping since then. But in 2016, my current path into Innovators Compass kind of took off as I started caring more about just making our best ways of getting unstuck accessible for every person and moment. And so now my often highly nonprofit but highly passionate work has taken me in that direction of just of taking so many different ways of making things better or unsticking things that I've had the opportunity to learn over all these years, whether it's products or leadership or better teams or better families that I feel are really pointing us to ask the same questions and living the experiment of what happens if we just name those questions, which we've all heard before, but don't remember to ask, and ask them more often and more deeply. And so that's kind of the professional trajectory of my life. And it's funny, it seems like it's come so far from being an engineer. But then when I look at that journey, I think it all fits together very well now. When I look, even from my childhood to today, I think there's some pretty, in hindsight, clear strands across it.
Well, since you mentioned about your childhood, let's travel time. Let's travel time because you have a phenomenal career, and that you only introduce it in less than 2 minutes. We need to dive in deeper to know more about that. So let's travel time together. Is that okay, Tyler?
Absolutely.
Okay. When I was young, I wanted to become an astronaut and wear in the suit and jump in a different planet, but life didn't give me any chance to do anything nearby, being one, right? So, for you, Ella, when you was young, what was your dream about your future, though?
Oh, that's interesting. I think that there was this surface dream, the things that you say you want to do when you're a kid. And then there was this sort of inside um, nagging that may have actually been a little bit different. And they never really fully met, I think, until recently. When I was little, let's see, I think the first thing I wanted to be was a meteorologist, like a weather person. And then I wanted to be a jockey at one point that rides horses. And then the next thing I remember was I wanted to be an astrophysicist because I read this really cool section about astrophysics in my, middle school science book, and thought that seemed cool. And then at some point in my high school years, I focused on engineering. So that was that. But as I look even at that trajectory going towards engineering, and looking deeper at, I think, what was behind it and what was, happening in my childhood and around me, was just this real drive to understand how things work and how to make things better. I had a very loving family. My parents were immigrants. My sister is a mentally and physically disabled person. And so there's, and I went to school in a wonderful school in a more disadvantaged part of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I think I saw a lot of, just struggle around me there. And I think inside I was always wondering, how do we make things better? How do we get unstuck? Because I could see a lot of things stuck around me, and then certainly, growing up, felt that inside too. We all do as young people, feel stuck in our different ways. And I was naturally inclined to make things with my hands and understand how physical things work. And so that's the direction I went with it first. Was, well, okay, engineers make things better. That's what they do. So let's be an engineer. Very literally, and so that's what brought me to MIT, where people think about how to make things better, and which was really fun and really interesting and fascinating, and at the same time not as probably deeply fulfilling as I thought it would be. And I don't think it was that conscious. It was always just this subcurrent that I started, while I was already still a student at MIT, I started teaching. So I started this robotics program that worked at the local high school, and there's a kind of robotics competition that I think might be worldwide now called First Robotics. And so that was like a channel for me to start immediately turning around all the stuff I was learning about how to make things and make things better at MIT and channel it to other people, and help other people do that and really unleash their ability to do that as simply as I could. So I probably should have noticed, actually, even as a freshman, the first thing I did was do some work in education alongside. It was like my side project next to all my engineering. And then, 13 years at IDEO, and the whole time I'm teaching at Olin College, which is a really innovative engineering school outside of Boston. I'm doing all of our workshops. I'm coaching teams and mentoring people whenever chance I get. And at some point, I finally realized that I'm more interested in helping people get unstuck than making new products or unsticking, a product design process. And whatever they're doing, whether people are designing a new product or they're trying to make their organization better or make their family better, seeing that, get unstuck and flow for them is what really makes me tick. And so it's still about making things better and figuring out how things get unstuck, but just in a very different way than I started out with at the beginning of the journey. And I think that I feel that really, really deeply. I've always felt it deeply. I was really interested in civil rights as a child, and as the world has just continued to take the path it has, I'm still very aware that very, very big things are stuck in the world. And I think that they are really related. There's the scales of stuck are very related to each other. The very big things that are stuck in the world weigh and stick individuals in tough places. But the other way around is true. A lot of the big things that are difficult in the world come from, things that are stuck within individuals. So they're all very kind of related to each other. And so I think that learning how to make things better and get things unstuck at any scale will translate back and forth, right? If we can, make ourselves, our families, stronger units, then that flows outwards. And the same goes for our organizations, our communities, our schools.
Wow, Ella. So when you were young, you got into the university in the engineering in the engineering world because you want to unstuck yourself or find the answer for yourself. So back then, what was the advice from the people around you, on, what is the best career for you back then, though?
Let's see. I don't remember getting a ton of advice from my school or anything, but I do remember one really specific conversation I had with my father, who picked up on, he asked me probably back when I still wanted to be an astrophysicist, he said something like, do you know the difference between science and engineering? Because, science kind of, and I think that they flow in and out of each other more than he made it out to be here. But, one is about understanding how things are, and one is about, creating new things. And I think again, that they do overlap. But I remember being like, I don't know what's the difference. But I think that he was picking up on my desire to really to create new and to create change, and even in the very physical world of objects. So he kind of turned me on to that, and I had a fellow student actually who had done a summer program at MIT who. We were in Wisconsin, so really far from MIT. I'd never heard of MIT before. But he said, hey, you should try to do the summer program if you can. It's called the Research Science Institute, and it's fantastic. It gives people from Wisconsin a chance to spend, a summer at MIT doing research or work, which I did between my junior and senior years of high school. And that window into, just the intense sort of curiosity and love for learning and for making things better in the environment at MIT really drew me in. I would say that I was drawn to go there, as odd as this is, for social reasons as much as for academic reasons, because everybody there was just it was cool to want to make things and make things better and learn stuff, and so I'm really grateful for that conversation with my dad. I'm grateful for that conversation with my peer who pulled me in and into that program, because I think those were some really key moments. And other just little programs here and there. That there was one at the Argonne National Laboratory, that I got to do. Just these outreach programs for young people to get to do, little experiences or a couple of week summer programs in STEM that pulled me in, and so those are great.
So Ella, how the journey leading to IDEO is the world, one of the best innovation institute in the world, though. Tell us about that.
So I majored in mechanical engineering and design at MIT. I kind of slowly went from things to designing, caring about the mechanisms, things to discovering really design for people in the later classes at MIT. And my favorite class that I took was my senior year. It was the first time I really worked in teams to design something for people, and I loved it. It was not as cut and dry. All of a sudden the answers aren't, it's not dull math. It's not choose it right or wrong. It's more a little more qualitative. How should people interact with this? So that was on the one hand sort of harder, since it was not as quantitative a practice, but it was exciting and it was challenging, and it was really compelling to just imagine the things I was creating in people's hands. And so I was starting to get a sense that this is what I wanted to do, and again had a conversation with a peer who said, hey, have you thought about IDEO? And I said, I've never heard of IDEO. And so then I looked into it, and it's funny, once you're aware of opportunities, they start to appear. And so then I noticed a little while later a little notice on my professor's door. IDEO was looking for interns, and there was an MIT alum there who was helping to make sure they drew from MIT. So I applied and got in and spent a summer there between my undergrad and graduate school, and then focused on design in graduate school, and fortunately was hired back again afterwards. But again, it was just sort of serendipity of conversation, and then getting that taste, that summer internship, that made me say, yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do.
Wow. And so how's fly as IDEO in for almost 14 years there? Right? How's life for you at IDEO though?
How was life there?
Yeah, how's working there? Tell us. Yeah.
Interesting question. I've never been asked that in that quite that way. It was different every day, because you're always working on different things. I worked on anything from airplanes to dog food packaging or snack food packaging to programs for weight loss or saving money. So very, very different projects in different combinations of teams with different clients. So the dynamic, the work, the challenge was different. IDEO was evolving tremendously during that entire time when I started. It was a company that mostly made physical objects, like the Apple Mouse, things like that. That was the kind of place it started, and then it transformed in so many ways in the way that it was structured multiple times in the work that it did, doing more strategic work, doing more and more digital work. So the work was changing, and in response, the people who worked there were changing. And so it went through a lot of transformation. So with all of those things, it was just a constantly changing experience. That was always very challenging in a good way, and also in hard ways. There was definitely plenty of stuff and stress. Leading my first big international projects where I've got teams, all around the world, which means, wait, when do I sleep? Because they're all in different time zones and I need to communicate with all of them. So there were professional challenges, there were personal challenges. They were wonderful, wonderful people who I am so glad to still be close to, that I worked with, that were creative and passionate about what they do. And so, so every day it was, every project was different. The paces were different. Some were really fast moving, some were a little more relaxed. But to each day, try to come in and understand what people need who are going to use this product, understand what people who are our clients need, understand a team and how that team can be most creative. I think it was just such a practice in tuning into people and their needs, and creatively rising to those needs on a daily basis.
So Ella, I'm gonna go to the next question, which is, like when you work with Adele, right? So everything was stable. You've been there for a long time. You got everything is, like really in the comfort zone there. But you decided to leave the organization and went solo, right? So what strength did you give to yourself back then to make that decision and create, like the innovations in Compass?
Well, first of all, so a big part of design is experimentation. So you might imagine that I did not just like jump off all of a sudden one day. I think for at least 2 years ahead of when I actually left, I was sort of experimenting on the side, just working for free with like nonprofits and just coaching them, and I'd been teaching, and I was doing other things on the side. So I had some window into what life might look like on the other side. It wasn't just a total jump into the darkness. And I think a big part of design is understanding what really matters most, and really aligning your principles, your design principles, with what you're doing. And so I think that was another big part for me. It was just looking at the projects we're doing. Yeah, those are pretty cool. Here's what I'm really passionate about. It's sort of more of a side thing for IDEO right now, and should be my main thing. I had kids. That was one of the biggest things that changed, right? So all these side projects I'm doing, I'm teaching on the side, I'm experimenting with nonprofits on the side. Like, I have a side gig now, right? I have a kid, so I don't have time for other side gigs. So that was another, big fueling factor. And I'd certainly put, as David Kelly told me, he was just so amazing when I told him that I was leaving. He said, you've given a lot. You put in your time. You've given a lot. You should feel free to go give it to, other places. He's been super supportive both of that choice and the work that I've done with Innovators Compass. So I'm super grateful for that. So I left, and I also left very open, right, without expectations. And that's another thing about design, right? You don't know what's going to happen. So I just left with a prototyping mindset, and I just kind of saw what happened, saw what came into my inbox. I'm very fortunate to have the name and network of both MIT and IDEO, and it turned out the things that came into my inbox were things I cared about. They were like coaching educators or helping create programs for companies that enable them to be more innovative, that sort of unleash, the everyday innovation in the people who are there. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Once you put yourself out there and you really I think you tune into what you care about and you let that out and you let it shine. You don't try to be, I always tell people who ask me, I'm going to go off on my own. How should I do this? And just be yourself, like figure out what you care about, what you shine at, and put that out there, because if you try to be somebody else, there's already somebody else who's doing that. So don't try to be somebody else. Just be yourself, put it out there, and it will, find you. And I don't know, maybe it was just luck, but that's what happened for me. So the kind of work that started coming my way was really stuff I was really passionate about. And it wasn't Innovator's Compass yet. Those words didn't happen until, I guess, 2016-ish, 2015, I'm not sure. But I left in 2012 with a company that I formed of my own called I2I Experience, which is both like seeing eye to eye with people and, going from individual to innovator, from insight to idea, whatever, you can interpret it however you want. And it was only through doing that work, working with people, leaving the space of IDEO where, people who would come to IDEO for a workshop are already pretty invested in design thinking, and they're probably corporate, so they've heard a lot of, lingo. That's kind of part of the corporate world, right, to use a lot of lingo. And then I left, and I was out in what I would call the real world now with people who are just, normal, aren't used to a lot of lingo. I'm working with teachers, I'm working with nonprofits, I'm working with all these people who are doing wonderful work in the world, and they're in the work, right? They're not in there for the process. They're in there to do this amazing work better in the world. And a lot of that stuff that I left IDEO with, well, it just kind of, it broke pretty fast. People would say, like, what is this? Like, what is this lingo? This stuff is really abstract. What are we doing now? How do I apply this to my work? And I just really quickly felt like I didn't want to hear any of those things, right? It's not their fault. It's me. Like, I was just desperate to unleash rather than teach, especially since I had little children. I could see that they do this stuff naturally, right? They are naturally. So if design, I've come to describe design thinking and a lot of other things as like being super duper curious about what's happening, like making lots of observations. And that's what they do, right? It takes like 2 hours to walk a block with a little kid. Like, they're naturally really curious. They are naturally really creative. They come up with thousands of ideas, all the time. They're always experimenting. And here, so we have it. It's like our naturally given tools and abilities. And here I am trying to, give it back to people, and they're feeling confused. So that's on me, right? I used to say at IDEO, blame design, not people. So it's like, okay, I got to change the design of what I'm doing. And even myself, I couldn't really give them a hard time about not getting what I was doing, because, if like my kid was screaming at 2:00 in the morning, I would sometimes find myself screaming back after 20 years of human-centered design. And that's not what human-centered designers do. So it wasn't even accessible enough for me. Much less, for other people. And also I have seen, fearless leaders of design thinking and other amazing practices out there, not be practicing their own practice. So that made me feel better. We all do it, right? That's where the mission statement, to make our best ways of getting unstuck accessible for every person and moment, which is the mission statement of what is now Innovator's Compass, was born. So it's in those moments where the people I'm coaching are just not quite getting it. I'm not getting it. I'm not practicing it myself, that I felt like I just want this to be way more accessible. And one day, it was really spontaneous in a workshop, and I think it was 2014. I just chucked everything else, but like I'd been making this picture that kind of looked like a compass. I didn't call it a compass yet, but that I was using to describe design thinking in a more like visceral way. Like, here's what this feels like. And then there were all these other slides. I would keep coming back to this to help people understand what was going on, and there was all the other slides. And so one day in this workshop, I just got rid of all the slides, put the picture up, and said, this is all we're going to use. Wow. And let's just, whatever it is, you people, you all came here because there's something that you want to make better in the world. Just start working on it. Just use these, this thing that's up here to just start. And we're going to just start coaching each other. And I'm not going to teach you anything. But it just had these questions on it that were way worse, like harder to understand than the ones today. I had to do a lot of clarifying, like, what do you mean by this? But they were able to start, and they were able to like start without me, and they were able to start coaching each other, and they were unleashed instead of taught. Wow. For the most part. And that there was no going back. And so that is where what is now Innovator's Compass, which is born, which is 5 questions that I find are asked by so many practices I've had the privilege to learn, like I said, whether it's design thinking or engineering practices or leadership practices or education or community organizing practices really do all ask, if in one way of expressing them is asking the same 5 questions that move us through a challenge in kind of the same way. So let me find my this is Innovator's Compass. I'm going to try to hold it up. Where's my camera?
Yeah, I can see it. The
Can you
pupil, yes, I saw it. The observation, the pupil. What is on the top right?
Yeah, so in the center is people or who's in. And so I found that, we call it human-centered design, but oftentimes the people would be forgotten. So let's actually put them in the middle. But who's involved, and then with and for those people, these other questions. So this compass really is about understanding whatever it is, whatever the challenge is, whatever the stuck is, from details to big picture, and from past and present to future. So really seeing all sides of something. So just starting with okay, in order to make something better, you first have to see what's happening now and why. So real details, right? Not generalizations. Oh, she's always late. Oh, actually, sometimes she's late, sometimes she's not late, and here's why. Then you can start to make it better, right? But then you can get overwhelmed with everything that's happening. And so you can get stuck there, oh my God, all this stuff is happening, I don't know what to do about it. So then being able to zoom out and see what matters most about that. Design thinking, you're writing a how might we statement, to sort of make sense of all of your observations, whatever. But what matters most to make this great? When I look at if you look at the symbols that are here, there's 2 picture frames and observations. Because we want to see what's happening, both the great moments and then the ones that are not as great, and it's seeing the difference between that you start to understand what's going on. So then, okay, we've seen all this stuff, what are my guiding stars? How do I get to great, what matters most, right? When things are going well. So just to pull out a few guiding stars for yourself so that you're not stuck in all that. But then you can get stuck with okay, I know what matters most, but I have no way of getting there. Or I only have one, right? People can get stuck with one idea and they're super stuck on that one idea. And when, not if it doesn't work, then they're really stuck, right? So then being able to see the big picture of all the different ways that you can do whatever it is that matters most in a situation. And, having space to actually dream. That's why it's a big fluffy cloud, and you don't have to be in details. It can be fuzzy and fluffy, but we need space to dream, because we can get stuck, not dreaming and not, seeing only one way or seeing only little bitty ways. We don't ever do anything big if we don't dream it. You still may not get there, but you definitely won't if you don't. So seeing what ways, plural, multiple ways there are to do things gets us unstuck from that. But then you can get stuck dreaming and not doing anything. And so that's why all of these things will have us look at, okay, what's a step, concrete step, no longer fluffy cloud, but, these are now very rigid, real blocks that you can feel and touch, and they make a sound when they land on the ground, real things with real details, who, what, when, where, how, what are you going to actually try, so that you actually, can then again see what happens, because you never know until you try, right? What happens. So, and you could call these, I think these questions are super fundamental to really any way of learning or making things better or reflecting or innovating. You could call them whatever you want, but giving them a name helps them be real. The answers, how we see these questions, are as real tools in our lives as a hammer. So how we see what's happening and why, I call them our observations, and they are just, they have impact. We can make a difference with our observations. We can make a difference with how we see what matters most. I call those our principles.
You call it what?
And principles.
Principles. Yeah, all right.
Call them design principles, or they could be educational, right? We use them all the time. These are words we actually use all the time. If you start to listen, we actually use them all the time. But my principle here is that blah, 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 so our observations, our principles, our guiding principles, right? We say that all the time. What are your guiding principles in this situation, right? I might just be planning dinner, but my guiding principles are that it's fun and healthy, Okay, great. um, I've like for that example, I'll just use that example for a second. So people involved would be like my family, my husband and my two kids, me, and my observations about that night is, oh, it's been a really long week, and everybody's kind of tired, and we haven't been eating very well, and I could go on and on about all the things, and oh, dinner's been kind of late tonight. Okay, fine. So given all of that, what matters most? My principles here are that, like I said, it's fun and it's healthy, and then okay, what ways would there do that? Like, okay, I can think of a few different dinners that I could potentially make, and I could really what? Actually, if I let myself dream for a minute, I want to do something really, really fun for dessert. Okay, like if I hadn't stopped to think about it, I would have just gone on autopilot and just like pulled the first leftovers out of the fridge. Obviously, I don't usually use this. This is like the lightest example I could possibly give, but right. So but I'm giving the power of each one, right? And then I have to actually go try to make something. Oh, wait, actually, I don't have that ingredient. Or, oh, I forgot that, she doesn't like cheese or whatever. So I might have to go back again, right? If I try it, it doesn't work. But I call these, our experiments for that reason. Because when you try something, you never know. We have questions in the back of our mind. I don't know, will they like it? Will they not? But you try it. And then if you can tell that these blocks are kind of falling over. They're originally standing up really straight. And then my then 4-year-old daughter said, the experiments shouldn't be that perfect. They're not going to work. You should make them like they're falling over. But I do feel like these questions are very fundamental. And then letting, once you give them a name, our people observations, principles, ideas, and experiments, they have a weight. They have a, like even for a little kid to know to say, hey, I have an observation, I have an idea, like to say those are things I have. I can see them, I can use them, I can voice them, I can change them, I can grow them. I'm not married to this one that I started with. Those are really, really powerful.
Wow. Well,
so that is the basic questions.
Since you say it's a very fundamental, and then we all know about this question, why didn't people ask those questions at the beginning and then got stuck in what they're doing now?
Yeah, right. I mean, that's because we don't, for so many reasons. I think that this is maybe a little cheesy, but I think of the 3 F's. So one is we forget, right? You just literally, sometimes you don't even realize you're starting something new, right? You just start doing it and you don't realize that something you maybe should have thought more about it until you get stuck. Or you forget, right? Like, yeah, it would be really good to maybe think about the other people who are going to be at dinner before I start making it. But, I don't think about it. I just start pulling things out of the fridge, right? We just plain forget that these questions move us forward. The second one is fit. Yeah, that'd be really good to, ask everybody, what's important to them for this meeting, but I don't really have time. I'm just going to plan a meeting. Or, we should really we should probably ask some of these questions together around this decision in this meeting that we have, but it doesn't really fit in our agenda. We're going to just go with the first idea, that comes, right? So we feel like we don't have time to stop and see what's happening and what matters most and, think about more than one way, right? Because that takes more time. Even though we usually, once you get stuck, you realize that would have been going slow to go fast, right? Had I done that, taken the time to do that, I might not be as stuck now. So forget, fit, and then the last one is fear, which is, stopping to ask these questions is, acknowledging that this first step that I was going to take might not actually be the right one. Like maybe there's things I don't know. Maybe I don't fully see what's happening. Maybe I don't have the right idea off the bat. And we don't always want to, admit that to ourselves or to others. We may not, we may be worried about opening those questions up to other people. What if what's happening for them isn't great and it means that I've done something wrong? What if what matters to them or the ideas they have aren't the same as mine? Does that mean only one of us gets our way? So there's, I think, a lot of reasons we don't stop to just, think how we can make things better, because, sometimes the devil is better than well, I don't know where this is going to go, right? If I open this conversation with my kid, I find so much with raising kids, right? Like what's going on isn't great. I can feel like I'm not really connecting, or with a spouse or with a client or whatever, right? Things can be going wrong with another person. But sometimes it's easier to just kind of like try and get through it than to really open up and say, okay, let's understand together, what's happening. It might hurt to hear it, but we're going to make it better. So those are the three ways I think we end up not doing it. Forget, fit, and fear.
Forget, fit, and fear, right? Ella, I have two last questions for the conversation today. All right, as my wife and I, we've been on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, because we believe that thinking is very critical to help making positive change. All right, so you've been helping people to be innovative, to get unstuck, and to design the works that work well for them, right, in their life and it works. So how have you been helping yourself to expand your ability to think over the years, Ella?
That's really interesting. I think one of the biggest things for me is to overcome those same F's, right? We all have them. Me too. And to not wait for it to fit in a way. So for me, I'll start with expanding my own abilities around this and then more broadly. But, for me, in the same way that I would ask other people to do, is to sort of think of this as a compass, not a map. And, I think when we follow a map, we're not thinking. When we're using a compass and we're like, this gives us a sense of where we are and where we could go, and it orients us, but we make the decisions. I think that's when we're like actually making our own thoughts. So, like, for example, I don't have to ask all these questions all the time. I could just ask one or the other. That's helpful to me right now. So to push myself in any moment to own my own, mental compass, and look for opportunities to just ask one or more of these questions and open up my mind. Because I don't find that, this is my personal improvement time, like setting that aside. That doesn't work in the world of anything, right? Being a professional parent, and we don't, it doesn't happen until it happens, right? Until you really are about that time. So I think the most important thing for me is to see it as not another what that I have to do, but a how I do everything I do. Beautiful. Is to whatever I'm doing, whether if I'm just sitting down to design my next workshop, how can I see more of like what's happening with the people I'm designing for? How can I use this? I always, whenever I'm doing a workshop, always try to partner with one or two new people that I've never worked with before. Like, hey, I'm doing this workshop. I'm really interested in what you do. Will you do it with me? So that, I'm working right now with someone who's focused, two people on a workshop for South by Southwest. One focuses social emotional learning, and the other one is about visual thinking. And so as we're creating this together, I've pulled more people, right? I've involved new people, and so I'm learning really interesting observations, principles, ideas from them about how they help people solve problems, right? That's how this is stretched. Is the reason I'm able to learn about all these different things is because I just let these people into my life that stretch me, and they think differently, and so it's really fun to mash up with them, and then to just to make it always fit, like to realize that that's the single most important thing I can do. To just
beautiful
to ask these questions a lot.
Wow. Well, thanks a lot for sharing that. You ask a lot of questions and bring people from different background, different expertise to come into the picture, so you can work together on creating something new. So that is very important. A last question for you is about the future. All right. So we've been knowing the past already. We know the present of what you're doing at the moment. So is there anything that Ella is working on that is exciting you want to share with me and the audience, so we can celebrate with you in advance?
Sure. Well, I'm always working towards that mission statement of making our best ways of getting unstuck accessible for every person in the moment. And so there's already tons of free resources and stories. Every time people use these 5 questions, whether they're in someplace in rural Africa or they're in a school in Arkansas, they share their stories, and I've been putting those on the website, and they keep making suggestions for things like an unsticker, that gets you unstuck. So I've been putting all these things on the website and making them free and available. So that is very exciting. But the next step for this kind of work is for it to be a book. And so that's what I'm working on right now. Yeah, I never thought the same person who creates things like this is not necessarily like predisposed to writing a lot of words, right? I want it to just be so accessible. So it's gonna be the most accessible, powerful book I can create. But that's what I'm working on right now, just to help pull together all like inspiration from really, really, really different disciplines, but into these, how we can bring them all together through these 5 questions that we just ask in any way, right? It's not a process, but just what happens when we ask these questions more often in different ways in our lives, in our work, in our school, in our world. And I'm always looking for people to, my principle with this is go to the website innovatorscompass.org. Everything for there is free. Please use it. Please share it, over seconds, over years, doesn't matter how you use it. But then just share back your stories, and you too may show up in my book, which is exciting.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for doing that, Ella, because all of the experience, all of the knowledge that you've been gathering, all the works that you've been working with others, that would be so beautiful to share with those who don't have a chance to get to know you, but have a chance to read your book. That's the way that you can help them to get unstuck in their lives. So the influence will be a lot bigger, and broader across the countries and continents. So do that, please. And then when the book is ready, please let us know, so we make sure that we're gonna be one of the first people purchase the book, okay, and share it with our audience also.
I would appreciate.
Hey, thanks a lot for the opportunity to get to know you, and thanks for being so kind to join and share your amazing journey with us. And I hope I will be able to see you again one day in Vietnam, or we have traveled to the US. I would love to see you, your husband, and your 2 daughters for a cup of coffee together, right?
No, our kids are money the same age, so come on over, stay with us, come to Boston. I would love that.
Oh, wonderful. Have a beautiful holiday season, and please send our loves to your family, all right?
Thank you. Congratulations on your 500th episode.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for making it happen. And have a wonderful day, all right?
You too.
Bye bye.